Most people will miss this. At a precise moment, nothing changes around you, but your body does. If you suddenly feel heavier, less willing, or quietly done with overgiving, this isn't random. It's the moment something you've tolerated stops agreeing with you. January 25th at exactly 1806. Nothing dramatic will happen in the world around you. No headline, no announcement, no visible shift you can point to and explain. And yet, for some people, that exact moment marks the beginning of a quiet internal disruption that cannot be unseen once it's felt. This is not about belief. It's not about spirituality in the abstract. It's about what happens when your body stops cooperating with a reality that no longer values it fairly. At that moment, your nervous system begins to change how it responds. Not loudly, not emotionally at first, but physically, subtly. You may feel heavier, less willing, less motivated to give the same energy you've been giving for weeks, months, or even years. And the most unsettling part is this: you won't immediately know why. While most people move through that hour as if it's just another evening, your system may already be pulling back. Not out of weakness, not out of burnout, but out of recognition. Recognition that something has been off for a while. You may notice a sudden resistance when thinking about work, money, or responsibility. A quiet irritation when expectations are placed on you. A sense that the effort you've been putting out no longer feels neutral or natural, but costly. This isn't a mood. It isn't laziness. It's your body registering imbalance. If you've been overgiving, underpaid, emotionally stretched, or quietly tolerating less than your worth, this is when the signal gets louder. And here's the part most people don't want to hear. This signal doesn't come to fix your life. It comes to interrupt it. Most people ignore that interruption. They push through it. They override the body and call it discipline. They stay busy so they don't have to notice the growing sense that their energy has been discounted. Over time, that choice creates resentment, exhaustion, and a deeper disconnection from self-worth. But some people don't override it. Some people pause just long enough to feel what's actually happening underneath the surface. And once that awareness clicks in, there's no going back to unconscious giving. Welcome to Prime Awareness. If this message feels uncomfortably specific, if it feels like it's pointing directly at something you've been feeling but haven't fully named yet, you're in the right place. This channel exists to explore moments like this, when internal shifts happen before external change, and when awareness becomes the real turning point. Before we go deeper, take a moment to subscribe to Prime Awareness. It helps this channel continue creating content that doesn't just motivate you for a moment, but stays with you long after the video ends. Now, understand this clearly. January 25th at 1806 is not about luck or prediction. It's about timing, about when the body decides it can no longer ignore the cost of staying the same, about when your system starts asking a question your mind may have been avoiding. Is this still worth it? That question doesn't arrive as a thought. It arrives as tension, as heaviness, as a refusal to keep performing at the same price. And if you feel it, you're not broken. You're not falling behind. You're responding accurately. Most people will keep giving until there's nothing left and call it responsibility. Others will notice the signal early and realize it's pointing towards something unfinished, something misaligned, something that's been draining value for far too long. This video will take you to the end of that realization. But before we continue, pause for a moment and answer this honestly. Which one feels closer to your experience right now? A, you feel tired, resistant, or undervalued, but you keep pushing through it anyway. B, you've started to feel a pullback, a quiet refusal, and a growing awareness that something has to change. Comment A or B below. If that question has been sitting with you since the beginning of this video, there's a reason it doesn't go away easily. What's happening now is not an emotional wave, and it's not a change in circumstances. It's a shift in how your system processes value. When the moon moves into Taurus, the effect isn't symbolic in a poetic sense. It's practical, embodied, and deeply physical. This energy doesn't operate in ideas or intentions. It operates in the nervous system, where decisions are made long before logic gets involved. Taurus governs the way the body measures safety, effort, and return. It's the part of your internal wiring that tracks whether something is sustainable or slowly depleting you. When this lunar shift occurs, your subconscious begins recalibrating those measurements. The result isn't clarity right away. The result is sensation. This is why you don't suddenly think, I'm undervalued. Instead, your body hesitates. You feel resistance when it's time to give more. Your tolerance drops. Tasks that once felt neutral now feel heavy, not because they're harder, but because your system is no longer willing to absorb the cost without acknowledgement. The nervous system is constantly scanning for patterns of exchange. It notices how much energy goes out and how much comes back, not just in money, but in respect, stability, and emotional safety. When that exchange has been uneven for too long, the system doesn't panic. It slows you down. That slowing is not a problem, it's a correction. Most people misunderstand this phase because it doesn't come with instructions. It doesn't tell you what to quit or where to go. It simply changes how your body responds to the same inputs. You may find that your motivation dips around things that once felt obligatory. You may feel oddly grounded but less compliant, less willing to stretch yourself thin to keep everything running smoothly. This is not about ambition disappearing. It's about accuracy returning. When the moon enters Taurus, perception becomes less idealistic and more literal. Your internal processing shifts from what should I do to what does this actually cost me? And that question is answered through physical sensation, not thought. You might notice that conversations about money, time, or responsibility suddenly feel heavier. Not dramatic, just dense. You may find yourself questioning arrangements you've accepted without complaint. This doesn't mean you're becoming selfish. It means your subconscious is updating its definition of value based on lived experience, not expectation. The reason this shift feels quiet but firm is because it originates below conscious awareness. Your body doesn't argue. It doesn't justify. It simply adjusts behavior to protect long-term stability. It pulls energy back from situations that no longer meet its criteria for fairness. And this is where many people get uncomfortable. Because the moment you stop overriding these signals, you're forced to acknowledge something you may have been avoiding. That part of your life has been running on undercompensation, that you've been paying a price that no longer makes sense. This lunar phase doesn't ask you to confront anyone. It doesn't demand immediate change. It simply changes the internal math. What once felt manageable now feels too expensive. What once felt normal now feels draining. And what once felt necessary begins to feel optional. That is the nervous system doing exactly what it's designed to do, not to make you comfortable, but to keep you regulated, grounded, and alive. And once that internal math begins to change, the effects don't stay theoretical. They show up in very specific, very personal ways. The first place you'll notice it is in your body, not as pain, not as panic, but as weight, a heaviness that wasn't there before. You may wake up already feeling tired, even if nothing physically demanding is ahead of you. Your body feels slower, less responsive to pressure, less willing to rush. This isn't exhaustion from doing too much. It's resistance to doing what no longer feels balanced. Your system is conserving energy because it no longer trusts how that energy has been used. You might notice that when a request comes in, another task, another favor, another expectation, your body reacts before your mind does. There's a pause, a tightness, a subtle no that appears before you've decided anything. This is not attitude. It's your nervous system declining an exchange it can't justify anymore. Emotionally, the shift can feel even more unsettling. You may find your patience thinning, not dramatically, but quietly. Small things irritate you more than they used to. Situations you once tolerated now feel intrusive. You're not angrier, you're clearer. The emotional numbing that allowed you to overextend is wearing off, and what replaces it is sensitivity to imbalance. You might also notice a kind of emotional withdrawal, not because you don't care, but because caring has been expensive. Your system has learned that giving emotionally without reciprocity leads to depletion. So it pulls back. You speak less, you explain yourself less, you stop volunteering energy that was never fully returned. This can be confusing, especially if you've built an identity around being reliable, generous, or endlessly capable. When that identity starts to crack, it can feel like you're losing motivation or purpose. In reality, you're losing tolerance for being undervalued. This is where money and self-worth become impossible to separate. Thoughts about money may surface more often, but not in a frantic way. They come as questions. Why am I doing this for free? Why does my time feel taken for granted? Why does this arrangement leave me drained? You may begin to notice unpaid labor everywhere: emotional labor, creative labor, relational labor. You start seeing how often you absorb stress, smooth situations, or carry responsibility without compensation or acknowledgement. This awareness doesn't come with outrage, it comes with a quiet discomfort that doesn't let you go back to not seeing it. At the same time, motivation behaves differently. You may still want stability, but you no longer want to earn it at the same personal cost. You may still care about quality, but you're less willing to sacrifice yourself for it. This can feel like laziness if you're used to pushing through everything. It isn't. It's discernment entering the system. One of the most telling signs is resentment that appears without a clear target. You're not mad at anyone in particular, but something feels wrong. That resentment isn't asking you to attack or confront. It's asking you to acknowledge a boundary that's been crossed repeatedly, often with your own permission. Nothing about this means you've failed. It means your internal standards have changed. The body no longer agrees to terms it once accepted out of habit or fear. These symptoms aren't random. They're coordinated. They form an internal message that says the way you've been valuing yourself no longer matches what it costs you to stay here. And once that message is felt, it doesn't fade. It waits, it watches, and it prepares you for the next realization, whether you're ready for it or not. And this is the point where most people turn away, not because they don't feel the shift, but because facing it would require them to stop pretending that everything is fine. When the body starts signaling that something is no longer sustainable, the easiest response is to override it, to stay busy, to stay useful, to stay productive enough that there's no quiet space for awareness to settle in. This is how the signal gets buried, not denied outright, but drowned out by movement. Many people interpret slowing down as danger. In a culture that rewards output and endurance, pausing feels like falling behind. So when resistance appears, they label it weakness. When motivation drops, they call it laziness. When resentment surfaces, they suppress it with logic or positivity. And for a while, that strategy works. But it works by disconnecting the body from decision making. Instead of asking whether something is fair, they ask whether it's expected. Instead of noticing depletion, they normalize it. They tell themselves this is just how life works, that everyone feels like this, that pushing through is the responsible thing to do. Over time, that mindset becomes an identity, the one who handles everything, the one who never complains, the one who keeps going no matter the cost. The cost is just postponed. What actually happens when the signal is ignored is accumulation. Resentment doesn't disappear, it stacks. Fatigue doesn't resolve, it embeds. The nervous system stays activated, constantly bracing, constantly compensating for imbalance. Eventually, this shows up as burnout, emotional numbness, or a sudden collapse that seems to come out of nowhere. But it didn't come out of nowhere. It was delayed. Ignoring the signal isn't strength, it's deferred self-protection. It's choosing short-term stability at the expense of long-term regulation, and the longer it goes on, the more dramatic the eventual correction becomes. Listening, on the other hand, is uncomfortable in a different way. It doesn't give you immediate answers or a clear plan. It simply forces you to sit with the truth that something you've been participating in no longer matches your internal standards. That truth threatens routines, relationships, and roles that once felt secure. This is why so many people turn back. Awareness creates responsibility. Once you see the imbalance, you can't unsee it. And pretending it doesn't matter takes more energy than continuing the pattern ever did. So people choose familiarity. They choose what's known. They keep giving, hoping the feeling will pass. They tell themselves they'll deal with it later, when things are calmer, when circumstances change, when there's more time. But the body doesn't operate on promises. It operates on conditions. When conditions don't improve, the signal escalates. What started as mild resistance becomes persistent fatigue. What began as quiet irritation turns into chronic dissatisfaction. The system keeps pulling energy back, not to punish, but to protect. The difference between those who suffer quietly and those who eventually realign is not willpower. It's willingness to stop overriding internal feedback. It's the courage to acknowledge that something has been finished internally, even if it's still running externally. Most people stay in the gap between knowing and acting for years. They sense the misalignment, but they keep moving anyway. And every time they do, they reinforce the message that their comfort, time, and value are secondary. The shift you're experiencing isn't meant to make you reckless, it's meant to make you honest. And honesty, once it enters the system, changes the direction of everything that comes after. And once honesty enters the system, the next phase isn't movement, it's stillness with awareness. This is the part many people misunderstand. They think a realization must be followed by action, decisions, or confrontation. But this moment is not asking you to do anything yet. It's preparing you to see clearly without rushing to fix or escape what you've noticed. What's unfolding now is a recalibration, not a breakdown. Your system is learning how to sit with truth without immediately translating it into behavior. It's learning to observe where energy naturally wants to withdraw, where effort feels forced, and where engagement no longer comes from alignment, but from habit. This pause is not wasted time. It's integration. You may feel an urge to label what's wrong, to identify exactly who or what has been undervaluing you. Resist that for now. Precision comes later. Right now, the task is simpler and more difficult at the same time. Noticing without interference. Notice where your body tightens when something is asked of you. Notice where silence feels safer than explanation. Notice which obligations drain you before they even begin. These observations don't require judgment. They don't require conclusions, they're data points, and your nervous system is collecting them carefully, updating its internal map of what is sustainable and what is not. This phase is not about chasing more money, more validation, or more recognition. Those come later, if they come at all. Right now, it's about identifying where value has been leaking, where you've been spending energy without adequate return, not because you were unaware, but because it once felt necessary. Something important happens when you stop acting on autopilot. You begin to sense what's complete internally, even if it's still unfinished on the outside. A role you've outgrown, a dynamic that no longer fits, a standard you've quietly raised. This is not loss. It's discernment. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to justify why certain things feel heavier now. The body doesn't negotiate with outdated agreements. It simply stops responding to them in the same way. You may feel a subtle grief during this stage, not for what you're losing, but for how long you carried what you didn't need to. That grief is not meant to pull you backward. It's meant to mark the transition. What's being prepared here is not a dramatic change, but a quieter one, a different relationship with your own energy, one where effort is intentional, not automatic, where giving is chosen, not expected, where value is felt first internally before it's ever reflected back to you. You don't need to decide what comes next today. The system isn't asking for a plan. It's asking for respect, for space, for permission to stop performing while it recalibrates. Clarity doesn't arrive as an answer. It arrives as a felt sense of what no longer fits. And once that sense is established, decisions become easier, not harder. For now, let the stillness do its work. Pay attention to what feels finished. Pay attention to what no longer asks for your energy. Pay attention to what feels neutral when you imagine letting go. Nothing needs to be forced. Nothing needs to be rushed. This is not the end of a story. It's the moment you stop lying to yourself about where you are inside it. And that awareness, once it settles, quietly changes the direction of everything that follows. What this entire message comes down to is not astrology, timing, or even change itself. It's awareness, a very specific kind of awareness that shows up when the body and the truth finally align. At some point in life, everyone reaches a moment where effort stops feeling neutral, where giving starts to cost more than it returns, where the body quietly says, I can't keep paying this price. That moment is not a failure. It's not a sign that you're weak, unmotivated, or falling behind. It's a sign that your internal standards have evolved faster than your external circumstances. The deeper lesson here is simple, but not easy to live by. Self-worth is not what you think about yourself. It's what you consistently tolerate. Your nervous system knows this long before your mind admits it. When something is no longer aligned, the body speaks first, through resistance, fatigue, and a loss of willingness to overextend. Applying this lesson to real life doesn't mean quitting everything or confronting everyone. It means slowing down enough to notice where your energy is going without return. It means paying attention to what drains you, not to judge it, but to understand it. It means giving yourself permission to pause before saying yes, to reassess before committing, and to stop performing out of habit. You don't need dramatic change to reclaim your value. You need honesty, restraint, and respect for your own limits. When those are in place, decisions become clearer, boundaries become quieter, and self-worth becomes something you live, not something you chase. Before we end, here's a simple question for you. Do you feel like your energy is currently being valued fairly in your life? Yes or no? Please comment your answer below and share your perspective so others can reflect as well. And if this content resonated with you, consider subscribing to the channel to support Prime Awareness and help us continue creating deeper, more meaningful content in the future.